Before we begin, let me get something straight. I didn't start my company in a garage. I know, you're disappointed. And who can blame you? If you've watched movies like Big Hero 6 or Back to the Future, if you've heard of Apple or Google or Microsoft or Amazon, you know that any entrepreneur is born out of a garage. But that's the thing. I'm not any entrepreneur. I'm just a kid, your average teenage boy. Not that famous businessman who quit his job to start a multi-million-dollar company after an amazing idea arbitrarily and rather unrealistically popped into his head one night and allowed him to change the world in a matter of hours. No, this is a story about the hard reality of the lean startup, the life and drive of the typical kidpreneur who may or may not reach success. This is a story about entrepreneurship at its very core. And it goes all the way back to middle school. So in sixth grade, I started public forum debate, and I had to write a lot of speeches. The European refugee crisis, the terror attacks in Paris. I don't think there was a single news headline in 2015 that didn't pop up in one of my debates. So naturally, I started reading the paper every morning. I thought my favorite section would be the technology column, but as of late, reading the news had turned into drudgery. The past few articles had been about random tech-related current events. Apple versus FBI, the explosion of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket containing a Facebook satellite, all complex, outlandish, technological gibberish. But today's headline was different. For starters, the picture on the cover was of a kid about my age. Flipping to the next page, I began reading about Botangle, a company founded by a young Idahoan only 15 years old, only 4 years older than me at the time. After investing his birthday money, a couple $100s from his grandma, into Bitcoin only to sell it for 100 grand less than 2 years later, he dropped out of high school in an effort to fix the public education system by developing an online educational platform for students struggling with school curriculum. Appalled yet slightly intrigued by the thought of a teenager dropping out of high school to pursue his entrepreneurial dreams, I continued reading, my mind lost in fantasies of creating my own company. Through experiences like those, I conjectured a rather rudimentary theory of being an entrepreneur. Envision an idea, make it a reality, and then sit and wait for the glory and fame to build up. It was with that convenient, elementary, and indubitably fallacious philosophy that I entered the multifaceted realm of entrepreneurship. So these days I call myself a serial kidpreneur. Over 2 years, I've built and scaled 3 companies, all of which failed miserably, and I'm now on to my 4th. For the past 3 years, I've served as co-founder and CEO of Zygantic, a platform that provides beta playtesting insights to independent game developers. Essentially, indie game developers don't have the resources to bring players into their studios to test their games like big box companies, including Nintendo and Mojang do. So they often struggle to get feedback on the beta versions of their games. Zygantic serves as a sort of middleman between developers and testers. Developers send us access to their games and topics on which they want tester feedback. And then we get their games tested by members of their target market and send them back the raw feedback, as well as trends and summaries of the testers' responses. In early 2017, when Zygantic was just starting out, my co-founder Rishabh and I were spending every waking moment just looking for customers. Any indie game developers who'd be willing to shell out a bit of cash just to get some badly needed product feedback. One Sunday, we left the bustling streets of downtown Seattle and stepped into the office of Indie's workshop. A few seconds after we knocked on the door, a young man introduced himself as the workshop's director and led us to the conference room where 3 mobile game developers were chatting as they waited for us to arrive. Before leaving his office, he patted me on the shoulder and grinned at the 2 of us, saying, "Good luck on your school project, kiddos. Hope this gets you an A+." Yeah. At the time, we shrugged off his comment and entered the conference room, forgetting about the incident as we immersed ourselves in the meeting. That afternoon, we walked out with 3 potential customers, and only 2 weeks later, we made a transaction with one of the developers for $100. It wasn't a lot, but it was money in our hands, and we were ecstatic. We immediately shared the news with the workshop director, thanking him for his help and asking for contacts of other game developers we could meet with. But a few days later, we got this response. Vignav, one of the developers in my office mentioned that you were charging them for work you performed. I wasn't aware that this was the situation. I thought this was a learning exercise rather than a business enterprise. Having completed a transaction with students of your respective ages has caused a lot of confusion in the workplace. I will not be able to put you in touch with any other developers. Sometimes you're shut down just because you're a kid, which is understandable. I am a kid. I'm a teenage boy who can't even tell the difference between iceberg lettuce and dino kale when my mom drags me to the grocery store. Age is one of the largest obstacles to overcome as a kid working in adult dominated industries. Adults are taken seriously in the business sector. They're given more access to resources and mentorship. And their companies are actually considered viable by investors and customers. Adults see kids' companies and immediately react by smiling and saying, "Oh, what an amazing educational opportunity." At first, we're nothing more than cute learning exercises for some people. Last year, I took on the surprisingly excruciating endeavor of listing every memorable phrase I've heard when I pitched to a VC or talked to a potential customer, or even just mentioned that I was a kidpreneur. Here were a few good ones, but this was my all-time favorite. This was a response to one of the emails Rishabh and I sent out as part of a project we called A Term a Day, in which we would release a new email each day describing a specific technology term or product, like Kubernetes or Amazon Elasticsearch, and its alternatives. To top it all off, based on our subscriber list, this message had to have been sent by a Microsoft employee. I guess his or her idea of the digital transformation was different from ours. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The next few slides have a few graphs. And when you see them, I want you guys to think about what all these graphs have in common. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's go through them one more time. Every single one of these graphs has almost exactly the same x-axis, ranging from 20 to the mid-60s and 70s. Not a single one of these sources even considers entrepreneurs under the age of 20. To me, this last graph was the most impactful. Unicorns are businesses with a valuation over $1 billion. They're those companies that start out with 10 to 11% month over month growth and hockey stick their way up to 10 figures. SpaceX, Uber, DoorDash, these are the companies that every entrepreneur aspires to create. And the fact that kids under 20 aren't on these graphs isn't just disheartening. It's indicative of a much larger problem. When you search up, "What is a kidpreneur?" on Google, your search results will look a little something like this. Every single result revolves not around the experience of kidpreneurs, but rather that of parents working to teach their children to become kidpreneurs. Frankly, this is ridiculous. It strips kids of their agency. It tells them that this seemingly defined process of becoming a kidpreneur is controlled not by them, but by their parents or teachers or adults in general. And this couldn't be further from the truth. The most successful kidpreneurs, and entrepreneurs in general for that matter, attain their success by entering their industries out of their own volition. The entrepreneurial mind, while it may not immediately decipher solutions, easily picks up faults, acknowledges shortcomings. Any entrepreneur's mind is coded to find opportunities for innovation and improvement, to deal with his or her dissatisfaction with the workings of the world. The best entrepreneurs are those that are willing and able to find, recognize, and most importantly, acknowledge the problems that surround them. Earlier in this talk, I said, age is one of the largest obstacles to overcome as a kid working in adult dominated industries. But here's the thing. Even though it's often a weakness, it's also our biggest strength. And if we learn to see it as that, to capitalize on it, to unlock its value, that's when unicorns are made. That's why I call age the hidden value prop. In the right contexts, it can be used as our special sauce, the bridge across the chasm from great companies to revolutionary ones. I'll start with a small example. When Zygantic was still in its early stages, just after we got that first customer, we sent out a survey to members of around 50 big box gaming studios. Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, Satoru Shibata, a director at Nintendo, and Laura Miele, chief studios officer at EA, just to name a few. The title of the survey was exactly what you'd expect. Playtesting with Zygantic, Zygantic's game services, pretty simple. We just wanted to learn how these big box companies executed on in-studio playtesting and what the main resources were that set them apart from indie game developers. 2 weeks later, we had 0 responses. I mean, it wasn't surprising. Why would the vice president of a startup grossing over $11 billion in sales respond to a random survey from a couple of middle schoolers? But then it hit us. Maybe these guys would respond if they knew we were middle schoolers. A few days later, we resent the survey, this time with the title 12-year-old entrepreneurs want feedback on their startup. Less than 3 days later, we had 33 responses. And seeing age as a value prop can go much, much further. As kidpreneurs, we may lack the credibility and financial viability that investors and customers alike want to see in entrepreneurs. But using our age as a source of appeal and means of disruption more than makes up for that. To start off, kidpreneurs are the perfect candidates for disrupting adult-dominated industries. Take Isabel and Caroline Burkhoff. The soap-making industry hadn't seen a major development in years, until the Burkhoffs, at the time just 11 and 12 years old, manufactured the first bath bomb with a surprise toy hidden within. Just 9 years later, they're up to $20 million in sales. And this idea of adding a twist, of revolutionizing not only products, but also perspectives, is exactly what disruption is. Only with the creativity and limitless imagination of kids like the Burkhoffs can great ideas like these arise to transform their respective industries. Gen Zers are also known for being social entrepreneurs, from startups focused on civil rights advocacy to companies striving to improve the environment. Kidpreneurs have been at the forefront of a movement known as do good sales, where customers can buy products knowing that they're contributing to society in the process. Even one of my own students at Street Code Academy, an East Palo Alto nonprofit aimed at bridging the gap between communities of color and the digital transformation, entered this domain of social entrepreneurship. She aims to donate 25% of her profits to the Namibia Rare and Endangered Species Trust. And at just 11 years old, she's already raised just under $200 to help save the pangolins from extinction. But as kidpreneurs, we also have to recognize that we're not alone and be willing to ask for help when we need it. Just last April, a month after the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, Matthew Wang, a Saratoga High alum, and I built TogaLink, a platform allowing senior citizens to obtain personalized, geolocation-based assistance by requesting essential items that volunteers can then deliver. But the thing is, even though we worked to spread the word about our app throughout the Saratoga community, we weren't able to tap into that senior citizen market that TogaLink was designed for. So we contacted Councilman Rishi Kumar to integrate TogaLink with his volunteer base and increase the number of TogaLink volunteers able to help out with tasks like picking up groceries, delivering food from the local restaurants, things like that. Then, to take it up a notch, we reached out to Mayor Howard Miller and West Valley Community Services Director Josh Silo, who helped us revamp the TogaLink platform in order to help digitize the sharing of resources across Saratoga. Starting out as a simple software project, TogaLink could only get to where it is now because Matthew and I saw the need to ask for help, to leverage the community around us. My desire to provide others with the same mentorship and guidance that shaped my work at Zygantic and TogaLink led me to StreetCode. I founded and taught the kidpreneurship class to arm students with the tools needed to subvert current stigmas regarding kidpreneurs and introduce them to the concepts of ideation, product development, marketing and sales, and revenue focused growth. To further encourage kidpreneurship in the Saratoga community and help provide aspiring entrepreneurs with the resources I wish I had while growing Zygantic, I created Wantrepreneur, the first open access online forum dedicated solely to kids' discussions regarding entrepreneurial concepts, and what I like to call the Stack Overflow for kidpreneurs. I hope to scale this platform, which currently has around 40 daily active users, into a global community of kidpreneurs jointly equipped to redefine the innovation economy. Now, I want to show you guys one last thing. A few months ago, I was listening to a talk by Ken Fine, the founder of a branding agency that's working with companies like Apple, Cisco, and Line. And one thing that Ken said really stood out to me. All entrepreneurs have imposter syndrome. And I found that really interesting. Imposter syndrome refers to the belief that you aren't as experienced as others perceive you to be. You assume that you have little knowledge compared to others without realizing that you simply have deeper knowledge in different subjects or fields. And kidpreneurs are no exception. In fact, I think that as kids, we face imposter syndrome tenfold, smack between Fortune 500 companies on one end and investor backed startups spearheaded by experienced adults on the other. We often feel that we're inexperienced, that we lack the intellect and education needed to attain success in these industries. But that's what being a kidpreneur is. We're constantly breaking barriers, subverting stigmas, taking unorthodox paths to success. And hey, that's how unicorns are made. But then again, what do I know? I'm just a kid. Thank you.